Are we living in the end times? I think so. Let's talk about it. And let's talk about Revelation and how it ties into Genesis. When you start diving into Genesis, what you see is that God blesses Noah in Genesis chapter 9. Verse 1, it says, "So God blessed Noah and his sons." And this is important to understand. And this is where God says to Noah, and God said to them and his sons, "Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth." Fill the earth. He's telling them to go out into the world and basically fill it. Get lost. Go out there and get scattered. It's important to understand that concept because that's God's command. God's command is to go out into the world and fill the earth. So keep that in the back of your mind. When we dive into Genesis chapter 10, what you find in verse 8 is that you are introduced to a guy named Nimrod. And we learn about him. He's a mighty one on earth. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Therefore, it is said, like Nimrod, the mighty hunter before the Lord. And the beginning of his kingdom was Babel. And it goes on to say that it was in the land of Shinar. Now, what's interesting about this is to recognize what we're talking about here. Nimrod is introduced to you in Genesis chapter 10, which was right after Genesis 9, which is the verse that we just read just a moment ago. And that we see Nimrod enter the scene shortly after we see God's command. God's command was for them to go out and to fill the earth. But now, as they are going out in Genesis chapter 10, which is where you see Noah and his sons spreading out, one went north, one went south, one went east. They went all over the place and they were doing what God told them to do, so they were obeying God. But then Nimrod gets born, and then you're introduced to Babel. It's good to remember that Nimrod's name is rebellion. It means to rebel. So keep that in the back of your mind as well. Now, when you dive into Genesis chapter 11, it says in verse 1, "Now the whole earth had one language and one speech. And it came to pass as they journeyed from east that they found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they dwelt there. Then they said to one another, 'Come, let us make bricks and bake them thoroughly.' They had brick for stone, and they had asphalt for mortar. And they said, 'Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower whose top is in the heavens. Let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be scattered abroad over the face of the whole earth.'" And so what I want you to pay attention to here is that their mindset, which was in Babel, which we learned just a moment ago that this is Nimrod's kingdom, and in his kingdom, his order was to come together instead of God's command, which was to fill the earth. So God in Genesis chapter 9, verse 1, God tells Noah and his sons to scatter, go out, go in the world. But then under Nimrod, as Nimrod gets born, he has his kingdom, and Nimrod's command, or man's command, was to come together. He's like, let us not be scattered. Let's come together. Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower whose top is in the heavens. Let us make our name for ourselves, lest we be scattered abroad. So they wanted to not be scattered, which was in direct rebellion to what God commanded them. So God says, fill the earth. Nimrod said, let us gather together, lest we be scattered. So you're seeing this oneness being created. Now here's where we start drawing some connections to Revelation, because what we need to understand about Nimrod is that Nimrod married somebody called Semiramis. So you have Nimrod, the man, and Semiramis, the woman. They get married. Now what's interesting about that relationship is that Semiramis, obviously, the woman, comes up with the story that she had a child, which she actually did have a child, named Tammuz. And what she told everybody was that that was an immaculate conception. And I need you to think about that for a second. Because Semiramis made up a story that she had this immaculate conception where this child just popped up out of nowhere, and it was a miracle. And she told everybody in her kingdom, in Babylon or in Babel, that that's what happened. And so people believed it. And so then that translated down throughout the line, throughout history. And so that is really provocative because it shows you the level of understanding that Satan had, because Satan knew that sometime down the line there was going to be a virgin birth. And this is the counterfeit of that virgin birth. So Satan was already on defense. He was already in the details, trying to deceive and deceive and deceive. And he did that because he knew there would be a virgin birth because of what God told God told Adam, and Adam and Eve, basically talking about the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent. He knew that there was going to be the seed of the woman. So because he knew that, he concocted this story about this virgin birth, which is where Semiramis, the woman, the mom, came up with the idea, or from Satan, obviously, it was a satanic thought, came up with the idea of the Immaculate Conception, where Tammuz entered the scene. And so all of the people started coming up with this idea that, yeah, this is the child, this is an Immaculate Conception, we got to worship Tammuz because he is a miracle sent from God. It was a complete lie. Now here is where we start drawing the connections to the book of Revelation. Because when you think of Nimrod, I want you to think of the political system. Nimrod was a mighty hunter. And so he was actively involved in the kingdom. That was the political side of things. And then when you think of Semiramis, I want you to think of the spiritual side, because she concocted this story which influenced the masses on the spiritual side. And so here's where you connect with the book of Revelation. Because when you read the book of Revelation, you read about a political Babylon and a spiritual Babylon. So Nimrod is a picture of the political Babylon, and Semiramis is a picture of the spiritual Babylon. In Revelation chapter 17, verse 3, it says, "So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast." And so what's interesting about this whole scene right here is you have two players on the board. You have the woman and you have the beast. And the beast, what does the beast represent? The beast represents the political system that is going to be actively involved in the end time scenario during the tribulation. The beast is the political system, which is identified as 10 kings during that time period. The woman, however, is there, and she represents the harlot. She is the great whore. She is the false church. She is everything that there is that is involved in basically whatever you want to think of it. It has its ties in Babylonian roots, but the woman, the false church, is this whole idea of a works-based salvation, which basically speaks of the majority of religions that are out there right now. But the idea here to take away is Revelation 17 talks about a political beast, which is the political Babylon, and then the woman is spiritual Babylon. And so what I want you to recognize, though, is that the political Babylon, this is what Nimrod was doing. This is who he was. This is what he wanted to do. The woman is Semiramis. So Nimrod here, Semiramis here. Semiramis was the spiritual Babylon, the ecclesiastical Babylon, the church, the false church. And so you have Nimrod being embodied, in a sense, by the political system, which is going to be, its fulfillment is going to be the 10 kings that are going to surface in the future. And the woman is embodied by the spiritual church, which is false Christendom. Anybody that preaches a different gospel than Jesus dying according to the scriptures, that he was buried and that he rose again on the third day, and that is for by grace you have been saved through faith. Anybody who preaches something different than that is a part of this false Christendom church. Now, what's interesting about this is that in Revelation 17, it says that the 10 horns which you saw on the beast, these will hate the harlot, make her desolate, naked, eat her flesh, and burn her with fire. So what you see is the turning on each other. You're seeing the whole Babylonian structure implode, because the beast, which is the political Babylon, is then turning on the harlot, the spiritual Babylon, and the beast, the political Babylon, the 10 kings, turns on the woman, which is Semiramis. So this is Nimrod turning on Semiramis, and that is something that was talked about all the way back in the book of Genesis. You're seeing the two, Nimrod and Semiramis, coming to their fulfillment, but then when they come to their fulfillment, they turn against each other. And this is why it's so interesting, because in Mark 3, it says, if a kingdom is divided against itself, that kingdom cannot stand. And if a house is divided against itself, that house cannot stand. And if Satan has risen up against himself and is divided, he cannot stand, but has an end. We understand his whole Babylonian structure that he is trying to bring to the surface right now, which is right around the corner. It's going to fail. They're going to turn against itself, and his house is not going to stand. Guys, we are one day closer to home.